Sup Shredders, my name is Logan aka Spiderhands and welcome to an SP Patrons video today that I make for Andreas as part of their custom monthly music review. And if we switch over to here, we have ourselves a track on the screen. This is from an act named Olafur Arnalds, titled Only the Winds. It's it's behind my camera, the title of this track. We're gonna listen through this song from start till finish. We're gonna hear what we think. Let's go. And I'm loving how immediately atmospheric it is with those really misty reverb-laden keys. And the synths. Gentle development there compositionally. And synth sequences with a bit of automation on the volume is kind of dope. Interesting repeaters on those kicks or that percussion there. How it, oscillates at the same rate as some of the other grooves within the rhythm of the piece. And it's nice just to have that low end kind of peter out for a little bit. Just to kind of allow you to miss it while it's gone. I mean, the fluttering of the strings is wonderful. Fantastic build there. Almost a crescendo with the way the strings came on the sides. It's a sincerely magical sound, Complex emotionality to it. It's kind of impressive that we had multiple dynamic bell curves within this of varying intensities across a 5-minute space, but it was still captivating and enthralling without differing too much from the original theme. You can hear the extra sounds of the bow being played. It was like it was live mic'd in a studio. Only the Winds. Hell of a track. And welcome to the conclusion of my review of this track from an act named Olafur Arnalds titled Only the Winds. Now, what do I think this track is about? I think that with the way that it was played as an instrumental piece, the strings and the keys and the misty reverb laden within, they were trying to be like the wind blowing past. It was meant to kind of transport you orally into a headspace where you could imagine being in that winter in like a place filled with snow and the breeze flying about. It was meant to be like that. It was you could use your imagination and come up with some really interesting visuals there. And I think that's part of the point of instrumental music. It's meant to invite you or encourage you to get involved within its own world and to really kind of space things out and pace things out. And I have to admit, I am really stoked. I am really, really stoked with what I've heard today from Olafur. Very competent composer. I think the fact that I could instantly place what I was hearing with what the title was is indicative of talent and skill. There were no vocals to comment on. There were definitely lead elements like some of the key parts or the strings. But, you know, as an instrumental piece, especially a track like at 5:21, it paced itself really well. I think, as I mentioned, there were multiple bell curves there where we had points where it was very, very quiet, like with the keys coming in and stuff like that. Some of the strings poking around in the mid-range. Then we built it with the percussion coming in and the other elements there in the arrangement, or simmering in the mid-range for another act, and then coming down with just that lone violin or whatever it was, kind of, you could hear it whispering, breathing as it slow bowed over the neck. And what I appreciate, I suppose, is, you know, if we jump straight into the music production for no apparent reason really, is that I can hear that this is a live performance from the way that the string sounded at the end. I could actually hear the bow going across. There are additional sounds that you can hear, as well as you can hear more than just the note, the clean note. You can hear the person attempting to do it. Little bits of shuffling and stuff like that indicates that it was a studio performance, a live take, and I really respect that, because it's not just, I mean, with technology these days, we potentially could have just gotten ourselves like a MIDI controller or like plugins and used the sounds from those, but we got instrumentalists to perform those parts together, and it's just inspired. It's wonderful. There's a grace to the aesthetic that was initially came in with the keys that slowly developed an intricacy over time and helped to introduce the other elements of the arrangement, with these strings initially providing a nice foil harmonically, a counterpoint on top to what's happening with the keys initially. Little bits of percussion interwoven within it to accept a kind of like quarter note groove there with an accent there, but with delays that repeated at an 8th or 16th note pace there, which allowed the theme to be more interesting because there was variations there. Like things were going at different paces, but they more or less kind of surmised into the one. And I think that was a smart move there to have. I think the track would have been too dry if the percussion hadn't had a similar effects chain or effect there as with the other ingredients in the mix. And it was a good choice to have the delay and reverb on the percussion and to have sort of an alternative percussion sound to what we might have in a lot of situations with tracks like these, where it could be very tempting just to use an acoustic drum kit or orchestral drums or something like that, but we were something completely different. You know, it's good. But yeah, I like the fact that we didn't just have the one string until the end, where it was the lone wind petering out after the storm. You can kind of imagine like it initially being like a bit of spectacle, a bit of wonder there with the way the keys glisten in the stereo field. But then, you know, as things build up and there's almost a crescendo in the volume there, as well as some automation of volume in certain bits as well, which I enjoy. I like when there's post effects chain, you know, like things added in a way that's very smooth, but, you know, doesn't seem forced. You know, we clearly understand our studio stuff, but we didn't want to take away from the actual effort put in by the instrumentalists themselves to kind of sound the way that they did. But I just like the fact that it created a mood. We didn't have the whole perceived loudness the entire time. There were variations within dynamic range. It was nice to have that moment of respite, like the calm of the storm in the center. I think that was the way to interpret it. Whereas for us to then take away from that and go back into a walk through the other side and come out with a simple memory of what came before it. The theme itself, I think, you know, without a lot of technical complexity from the instruments, simply a lot of niching together, an amalgamation of various strengths within each of them to fill a wider purpose. The theme sounded wistful and as if it was missing something. There was a sadness to it, a longing for it maybe to not be winter anymore, a dreariness that kind of makes me kind of think of like someone huddled in a snowstorm being unable to escape. It was the wailing of the strings, I think, in the higher registers that made me feel that way. Someone crying out, especially at the end, a very sad crying there as someone gradually loses the energy from doing it for so long. And that's incredibly depressing, but I think the beauty of the strings, the pianos combined with the other elements there and the percussion coming in before it came away to offer a bit of kind of airiness to it. There was a tonal equilibrium reached where it didn't become too dark. I don't think the theme with the progressions and bass line was too dark to begin with, but it was more a situation where especially if we'd had vocals, like I think a track like this, it's rare that it wouldn't have benefited from a story being told. I almost feel like it's stronger because of that mystery there and the openness for us not to judge by having a hand held by the lyrics. I think overall the way to look at this, even if I described how the song, the overall mood of it made me feel, because there wasn't a lot of variety with like the different directions of the bass lines and chord progressions. The chord note accent mixed with the whole tones, but the occasional 16ths remained relatively constant throughout, even if there were various instruments coming in and out. And it wasn't like, it might have seemed like we were pausing for bits there. It still seemed relatively, the motif sounded constant, and so I think it was a journey with a similar theme. We got to the end and we didn't get a happy resolution there. Maybe that's something that's a part of the album and you need to have the whole album for Now I Am Winter as context, but regardless, it's impressive. It's a really good instrumental piece and I'm glad that opportunity to review it, so thanks to Andreas for that. Outside of the way that it sounds though, the way it made me feel, the impression from the various techniques used within the songwriting, as well as the really tight instrumental performance itself, I think the studio recording, mixing, and mastering was masterful. It was a phenomenal recording. It was so glorious in the way that it was structured and handled there. We had just musicians who could play well and played not only their bits to a T, but also dynamically really tightly, and it was much more alive because of that. I think if you hadn't paid attention to the forte parts, the municipal parts, it wouldn't have had that kind of sparkle to it, but we did. And you know, on top of that, if we just take a moment to admire what's going on with the state of simply the width of it and the stereo field, how wide things were, and how charming it was to be enveloped by that, but also the fact that despite the weight of it and the oomph and the low end, it was relatively balanced in the frequency spectrum, so there were no resonant frequencies. But just the dynamic range going down to those really quiet notes, bringing it back up where it soared. It was remarkable with what was captured within those microphones. But it was also nice and loud without pumping. So it's commercial grade, and limiting and bus compression was handled well. I mean, effectively, this is my review of this track from an actor named Olafur Arnalds, titled Only the Winds, and hopefully you enjoyed it. If you did, please go show us some love via the various social medias and a Spotify page, and stay cool and stay safe. Please remember to support your local musicians and artists at this point in time, as either help more than ever thought of crazy stuff going on in the world, and I will catch you in the next SP Patrons video. Spiderhands out.